I came across a candidate profile the other day on LinkedIn, and I was super excited to see this was a candidate that I placed at a well-known medical device company 5.5 years ago, and she is still with the company. And whenever I found her and started interviewing her and was working with her throughout the interview process, I knew that she was just a super solid candidate, and she was also really interested in the opportunity for all the right reasons. So for all of those reasons, we had a really good match. The challenge was getting the manager to stick to the interview schedule. It was so challenging to get him pinned down, if you will, to go ahead and book an interview. His schedule was just kind of all over the place. That's sort of the way that he operates. And he is a super nice guy, solid guy, just a really, really good guy. However, this was the most challenging interview process I have ever worked on, and the most work I've probably ever done to get a hire. And the reason was because he kept rescheduling the interviews. And this candidate, she was so positive. She had such a great attitude throughout. And she was also, of course, working her current full-time job, and she was also planning a wedding. So that's a lot of stressful events, planning a wedding, interviewing for a job, which can feel like a full-time job in itself for sure, and then working her own full-time job. So every time we would get her scheduled for an interview, the manager would reschedule, and it was driving me crazy. I'm like, oh my gosh, because as a recruiter, we understand that, you know, the candidate, they have their own priorities as well. And if they keep getting rescheduled, or things slow down in the interview process and they're not moving forward, and or there's no communication, no feedback, they may start to feel like they're not being valued, like they're not a priority for this company, for this manager, for this opportunity. And while that wasn't the case, it can still feel that way to a candidate. And it is so important to keep the interview process going, to keep that momentum going once you identify a good, solid candidate. Now, of course, there's still multiple steps to go through, and you do want to stick to a process. You can move steps around, but it's so important to keep the process moving, because otherwise what can happen is your star candidates can fall out of the process when they are not getting the attention from you, the hiring manager, and or the company. They're going to shift their focus elsewhere. And a candidate that maybe they weren't actively looking before they started interviewing for your opportunity, but I guarantee you now they likely are, because that's what happens. We start to get curious. Maybe we're not looking for an opportunity, but then something comes our way and it piques our interest, and we start to get curious about what else is out there. It's just momentum. We start the process with one company, and then we get curious, we get excited, and we want to see what else is out there. So if this happens and your star candidate is getting attention and there's momentum and forward movement, and they're feeling valued with another company, and that interview process is moving faster, even if they're highly interested in your role, if the process is too slow, they're likely to remove themselves from the process. And a lot of times there will be delays in the hiring process that are out of your control as a hiring manager, but sometimes they are in your control, the steps in the interview process. And maybe you've got a vacation planned, or a meeting and or fires to put out where you're not available for another week or two, or maybe even 3 to do that next interview. But then maybe you can move something, one of the steps around, and have another member of your leadership team do the next interview, or maybe somebody from your sales team, if you're leading a sales team, maybe have the rep meet with somebody on your sales team. This way they're still having connection and interaction and learning more about the role and getting their questions answered, and they're starting to feel more and more valued. Candidates want to feel valued, they want to feel wanted, and they want that momentum. Even if the process is maybe 6 weeks instead of the ideal 4 weeks, as long as there are some additional touch points in there where they're still feeling a connection and communication, then they're more likely to stay in process. So I was so happy whenever we finally got the offer extended to this candidate. It was so much work. I think we probably rescheduled the interview, or multiple interviews, at least 5 times. It was a long time ago. It was like 6 years ago. So I don't remember exactly, but I know it was, I was on pins and needles, kind of holding my breath every time I got the manager and the candidate scheduled for an interview. Like, please don't reschedule. And then he would, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So recruiters are, not that this needs to be your number one concern, hiring managers, but your recruiters are working so hard for you. It is so challenging to get good candidates because the candidate that you're looking for is likely a very specific profile. And so we have to take time to conduct multiple very targeted searches and continue varying those searches to identify those solid candidates that fit the background, the profile, the experience that you are looking for. But then there's not only that, that candidate needs to be open to looking or want to find a new opportunity for the right reasons. If the why they're looking or open doesn't really match up, then we have another problem there, because this could result this can result in turnover. So there are so many factors that go into play in finding the right candidate for you, and then coaching that candidate, leading them throughout the interview process and moving them toward the finish line. So focus on what you can control as a hiring manager. Do what you can to keep the lines of communication open between yourself and the recruiter so that they are looped in and they can keep that communication and updates with the candidate. So this way the candidate feels valued, and then they're much more likely to keep moving through the process, to stay in the process and moving toward the finish line so that you can make your hire. Because when we have these start and stop interview processes, candidates are more likely to fall out, and then you are starting your interview process over again. So I'm again super excited to see that candidate is still with this company 5.5 years later. That's less and less common, especially with medical sales roles these days. So I'm super proud that was a really good fit and that it all worked out. But sometimes it doesn't. Candidates want to feel valued, they want attention from you, and they want communication from you. And so if there's going to be a delay in the process, at least let them know, and let them know why. That way they feel looped in, because no news is not good news in the interview process. And then if there is going to be a little bit of a delay in the interview process, do what you can, or a little bit of a delay between the next time that you yourself are able to meet with that candidate. Do what you can to insert another step in the interview process or move something around. This way the candidate feels like they're moving forward and there's some momentum. So hope that helped. If you got some value from the video, I invite you to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.